Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Olena and I used to always say I'm an English teacher and now I am not an English teacher. What am I? I make YouTube videos on international topics. Let's just do that. Yeah, I make YouTube videos on international topics. I had just moved back to the US from Korea. And I had just moved back to the US after living abroad in general for 6 years. That is a long time. So I lived in Morocco for 4 years and I lived in Korea for like a year and a half. All right, so I'm gonna just round it up to 6 years in total. And of course, the two countries are completely different. My experience in Morocco was very different from my Korean experience. But every time I visit the US, or moving back to the US, I definitely notice a lot of feelings and a lot of thoughts that go through my head. Just because I'm so used to whatever host country, like their culture, their language, the way that they do things, even simple things like greetings, you know, and then I move back to the US or I visit back to the US and it's a big mind. Yeah, that's exactly how I would describe it. So I'm going to be talking about reverse culture shock. First of all, have you heard of culture shock? You know, it's kind of like when you move to a different country and everything is so new and so different and the way that people do things is like shocking to you and it can be a little bit difficult to adjust to in the beginning. Reverse culture shock is when you move back to your home country and then you have to readjust again to your home country. You think you don't have to readjust? Oh, you do. You definitely have to readjust. I was trying to find like an official dictionary or something that defined reverse culture shock, and apparently that is just not an official term. That is just kind of like a term that people use, you know, in the international community and in the diplomatic community. But there's not a definition out there. I did find one from UC Davis. And I think it's for people who go study abroad. And their definition is, it's a term used to describe the feelings of surprise, disorientation, confusion, etc., experienced when people return to their home country and find that they do not fit in as they used to. This may be due to a change in perspective, a decrease in excitement, an appreciation for and of different customs, or because during the travels, the home country was idealized. So I have so much to share, and I kind of just jotted down some really random thoughts that came into my mind when I thought about my experience in culture shock. And the biggest experience I had was actually when I first visited the US after being in Morocco. I think it was after 2 years of being in Morocco when I went back to the US. And that was my biggest culture shock, just because Morocco and the US are so different. Whereas Korea and the US, yes, they're different, but there's a lot of similarities between the two countries. They're both, you know, developed. Korea's a little bit more Western leaning or favorites Western things. And they're both work-oriented as well. There's just a lot of like commonalities. I mean, of course it's Korea. It's going to be very different than the US, but they're more similar than Morocco is. So that was the more kind of shocking thing. First, we're going to talk about surface level things that was like, whoa, to me when I first got here. And I am from the South. So of course, like people in the US and the South, they're a little bit different than say like New York, Texas, California, what have you. I remember being at the airport, I just got off the plane and I was in line. And there was somebody in charge of like herding people through the line. And she said, ma'am and sir and please. And I was like, whoa, this is weird. Because in Morocco, they don't really say please. They say thank you sometimes. Yeah, they say it in their own way. It was weird and it was so organized. I remember thinking that. I was like, wow, this line is so organized. Wow, she's saying yes ma'am, yes sir, please. This is so weird. Another thing is greeting people. So in Morocco, you shake hands and then you put your hand to your heart. I literally still do that now. And I've been out of Morocco for 2 years and I still put my hand to my heart. I cannot get rid of this. There are a lot of Arabic words that I still want to say so bad when I'm talking, and it's so hard to stop myself from saying those things. Another thing that I noticed is like in the job that I have now, I work with a lot of Spanish speaking people that are rehabbing the motel that I work at. I will randomly, I will just talk to them and I'll randomly just spew Arabic words. And I'm like, they just look at me funny and I'm like, oh, that was not Spanish, that was Arabic. And even just yesterday, I was talking to somebody and I was like, oh yeah, toothpaste, dentifrice. Or I think I actually said it in a Spanish accent. So I said dentifrice, right? Dentifrice. No, that is French. That is not. Oh, the languages. That is not, that's not Spanish. And it's been so hard for me to reorient my brain from Arabic to Spanish. And I used to speak Spanish really well. I have a minor in it. So of course, I was a really good Spanish speaker and I dated somebody whose mom didn't speak English for a few years and we spoke Spanish to each other. And now I'm I just get so confused. I just have languages just jumbled in my brain and it's so hard to reorient my brain back to Spanish. So that's been really hard. Another thing I've noticed is customer service. It's very different than it is in Morocco or even in Korea. I think the US focuses a lot on giving good customer service to people. And there's a lot of, ma'am, sir, please, thank you. Oh, did you find everything okay? Or, oh, can I help you find something? I never got that in Morocco. In Korea, I only got it in one store. So I think that's just something that they had to do, but I never got someone asking me if there's something I need help with or if I found everything okay, things like that. And now we're gonna move to the more deep, kind of complicated feelings that you would feel when you're moving to another country. And as I said, I felt it, I feel it a little bit, I feel it a good bit actually, moving back to the US, but every time I visited, I felt it a little bit stronger, but maybe the more often I visited, the less I felt it. Maybe I just accepted those feelings more and I was more aware of what I was experiencing, because before I went back to the US for the first time, I knew of reverse culture shock and I knew of what to expect. But I didn't think that was gonna be me. I was like, I haven't changed, I'm the same. There's nothing about me that's changed. I'm the same person that I was when I left. No girl, you have changed a lot. I didn't even realize just how different of a person I was until I visited back in the US and how uncomfortable I felt. I especially remember being extra sensitive to views and topics that I disagreed with when I was speaking with people. And with certain people, I would used to tolerate them and not really have, I knew deep down that I felt differently, but I didn't have the strong, rooted feelings that I did when I lived outside of the US. I think just because I learned so much. People learn in many ways, and I learned through experience, and I was very confident in my experiences and confident in how I think the world should work and how the world does operate. I have a very broad view on things and more open view on things. And, with some people, when I used to kind of feel like there was something different that I believed, and I couldn't quite pinpoint it yet, I was very confident in what I believed. And so it was like harder for me to tolerate listening to things and I'm like, this is so wrong. Going back to like you changing, I think the people in my life thought that I was exactly the same person that I was when I left the US. And I definitely don't feel that way. I feel very different than I was. I feel like a whole completely different person. I don't know if my family or friends can tell. They never told me if I've changed or that I've changed. But when I'm around them, I definitely feel that kind of divide or that kind of like distance that I didn't feel before. And the way that they treat me, it's like exactly the same as if I went on vacation. And I didn't go on vacation. I was gone for 6 years. And that was another really weird thing. It's like people act like you just went on vacation and you just had fun somewhere and that's it. But being gone for 6 years, you had a life built. You had friends, you had like relationships that you built, you had a foundation in a community. You were like a contributing citizen, not citizen, but you know what I mean, of a community, and you had a life. And I've had people tell me, oh, you got to start your life, come back to the US and start your life. And to me, I was like, ouch. Another thing that is kind of sad that happens to a lot of people when they go back to the US is that people don't want to hear your stories. They just don't. People don't want to hear all the crazy things that you did, or about your friends that you made, or this food that you tried, or this like adventure that you went on. People don't want to hear it. Maybe they care for the first 30 seconds, and then you can see their attention kind of like going away a little bit. I definitely noticed that when I tried to talk about the countries that I lived in and the cultural things and stuff. And I'm just sharing it because it's interesting to me. I think it's interesting, but I failed to realize that I'm different than a lot of people. I led a very different life than most people lead. And they don't understand. They've never lived that type of life, so they can't relate to it. What we do is not normal at all, and we have to realize that it's not normal and that nobody's going to understand it unless they've lived that life. So that's something I have to tell myself. So I really have to hold back on my stories or like sharing fun facts, you know, things like that, you know, because I know a lot of people think in the back of their mind like, well, you're not in Morocco anymore, you know, like you're not in Korea anymore. I know that's what they're thinking. Because sometimes you will compare things like to the countries that you've been to, be like, well, in Korea they actually fine you for recycling. Recycling is an important thing, you know, and maybe they'll be like, well, this is America. We have the freedom to recycle or something, you know. I know that's what people are thinking. They're just not going to say it. Making new friends. Very hard in the US. Very hard. I am living in a different city than what I'm from, and I have not made any friends. I have not. Whereas abroad, there are expat communities. It's so easy. In Morocco, the culture is very social and it's like so important to have a social life. So I made so many Moroccan friends. In Korea, I didn't make any friends with Koreans other than my coworkers, but I did make a lot of expat friends. So many expat friends. It's interesting. In Morocco, I had almost all Moroccan friends. In Korea, I had almost all expat friends. And it was so much fun. They would put together activities all the time for people to do and to meet other people. And I tried to do that here. I did one activity and nobody came. So I'm still on my friend making journey. Something else I've noticed is like how things have changed. Things like technology has changed. Things like cities growing and growing and growing, that has changed. Atlanta has almost doubled the size since I've lived there. Almost doubled. I haven't lived in Atlanta in 8 years, and it's so different every time I go there. The metro just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just so different, and people expect me to kind of know all of the new technologies and all the new apps that everybody's using. Something else about culture shock is that you are more aware of the weaknesses of the US and the strengths, of course. For me, I became a lot more aware of the weaknesses of the US and how things could be improved. For example, in Korea, healthcare is something that everybody pays for, and it's high quality. It's just really good healthcare. Everybody knows that Korea has great healthcare, and everybody has health insurance, and healthcare is not expensive. It's very affordable and high quality. And I think, in the politics of some sides of the US, people don't believe that that can happen, that you can have affordable healthcare and high quality healthcare. That can be done. Yeah, so you will notice a lot of things that other countries do that you're like, man, America should do this. However, there are some things that I really appreciate about the US. I do appreciate that there are, more freedoms in the US than there are in Morocco. That it's not a religion-based state. This video is getting too long, so I hope you really enjoyed my thoughts on reverse culture shock and my experience on it. And let me know your experience. Did you ever have culture shock? And was there anything that I missed that I didn't say? Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!